In our last few videos, we've been talking about different types of Cisco telepresence endpoints and how we can set up a call between these endpoints. However, sometimes, instead of just a point-to-point conversation, one location talking with another location, we want more locations involved. That's a video conference call when we have 3 or more participants in a call. However, we have an extra requirement here. If I've got, in this example, 3 participants, I need something that's going to take those different audio streams and blend them together into a single audio stream that can be sent out to the participants. And I need something that's going to take the individual video streams and combine those and send those out to the individual participants. And there are a couple of options for doing that, and that's what we want to talk about in this video. One option is to use a Cisco telepresence MCU. That's a multi-point control unit. Another option we have is to use a Cisco telepresence server. Each of these have the ability to combine our audio streams into a single stream and our video streams into a single stream and send them out to the individual participants, but they do have a different feature set. Let's contrast to compare the Cisco telepresence MCU with the Cisco telepresence server. Starting with the Cisco MCU, let's understand that the call control component of this video conference call, what gets the call set up and what makes participants join the call, that call control component can either be Cisco Unified Communications Manager, CUCM, or it could be the Video Communication Server, VCS. For example, if a company does not have a communications manager infrastructure for their IP telephony, they might have some other system, but they still want to use Cisco telepresence, they might have a VCS server instead of a Cisco Unified Communications Server. Now, the MCU is available in a hardware-only solution. There are a couple of Cisco telepresence MCU appliances. We've got the 4500 series and the 5300 series. There's also a chassis version where we can put in different blades and we can have lots of ports, and that's the MSE 8000 series. But a limitation for the MCU is that it's only going to support non-immersive endpoints. We're not going to be able to have video conferencing set up between these different big room systems like the IX5000 or the TX9000. And similar to the MCU, the telepresence server, it can use either Cisco Unified Communications Manager or Video Communication Server, VCS, for its call control. Interestingly, though, it's available in a hardware or software solution. Specifically, you can buy telepresence server appliances. You can get the 310, the 320, the 7010, the 8710, or you can have a virtual telepresence server. You can run a telepresence server on a VMware ESXi server. And unlike the MCU, it supports not just non-immersive endpoints, it can support immersive endpoints. The big room systems can be joined together in a video conference. So obviously the Cisco telepresence server has some higher end features as compared to the MCU. In fact, Cisco has an upgrade path, and depending on your model of MCU, you might be able to upgrade that to a telepresence server. Let's dig just a little bit deeper now and talk about some of the specific features available on these different platforms, beginning with the Cisco telepresence MCU. It has a universal port feature, which means the ports going out to different participants in this video conference can send video out at different resolutions. Depending on what kind of device is connected to this port, that's going to determine what kind of video we're going to be sending to that endpoint. Now, clear vision and super resolution enhancement, those are very similar to one another. They're able to take standard definition images and enhanced definition images and make them look very similar to high definition. Now, when I say standard definition, I'm talking about 480i, and enhanced definition, I'm talking about 480p, and high definition, that could be either 720p, 1080i, or 1080p. And another feature is artifact removal. If we have low bandwidth, or maybe we're dropping some packets, when our endpoint tries to recreate this digital image on screen, there might not be enough data. We might be missing some bits. Well, artifact removal does a great job of attempting to remove those visual artifacts. It can look at other data from previous frames and interpolate approximately what that missing pixel or those missing pixels might have contained. Let's think about some features now for the Cisco telepresence server. One of the cool things about a Cisco telepresence server is we can have a variety of endpoint types participating in this video conference. We can have multi-screen systems talking to single-screen systems. We can have immersive endpoints talking with non-immersive endpoints. And there are a few features that I want you to be aware of for the Cisco telepresence server. It has an active presence feature, and that deals with the layout on screen. There are several options for this, by the way. How do you want all the different conference participants to appear on screen? Do you want everybody to be in their own little box? Everybody's the same size in their own little window pane? That's an option. Or with active presence, we can have a layout that keeps that immersive feel. It looks like you're talking face-to-face with someone. And the other conference participants who are not participating, they're not talking at the moment, you can still see them. They're in smaller panes, but whoever is the loudest talker, whoever's engaged in the conversation right now, they're going to appear in a bigger window, so we get that immersive experience with them, but we still see everybody else in their own smaller pane. Cisco also has a telepresence conductor product, and that's able to intelligently select an appropriate video conferencing resource. It can select a telepresence server. It can select an MCU if needed, whatever's most appropriate. And when I say most appropriate, I'm talking about in terms of available bandwidth and the capabilities of the participants in the video conference. Cisco Telepresence Server supports the ClearPath technology, which tries to minimize the impact of packet loss in a low bandwidth environment. And it also supports cascading. We can cascade, in other words, we can interconnect multiple Cisco Telepresence servers together to give us a video conference with a greater capacity of participants. In other words, the telepresence resources are additive. We can add them up through cascading. And in addition to supporting the sharing of video in a video conference, we can also support with the Cisco Telepresence server a presentation display where we're showing something like a slide and everybody's seeing that slide. We can send that presentation display through a separate video channel. And that's made possible in a SIP environment by using something called BFCP, Binary Floor Control Protocol. It's made possible in an H.323 environment by using the H.239 standard. Now, by the way, if you're setting up a SIP trunk that's going to be carrying this information between your video conference participants, there's a checkbox that I want you to be aware of in the SIP trunk configuration screen. You need to check a box to say you want to enable this BFCP, this Binary Floor Control Protocol. Otherwise, you can get some strange symptoms, such as maybe your presentation is showing up where you thought your colleague was going to show up on this screen and vice versa. And since the Cisco Telepresence server does support these big room systems with multiple screens and multiple cameras, it even has the option of influencing which camera is going to be used within a room to send video from that room to another site. Let's imagine that we've got one of those big tables. We've got lots of people sitting at the table. We've got a couple of people being picked up by one of these three cameras, a couple of people being picked up by the middle camera, a couple of people being picked up by the other camera. Let's say we've just got one person in the room talking. We've got 6 people. There's a camera per 2 people, we'll say, but only one person is talking right now. One option is to use the segment switched mode, where just that camera is going to be used to send video to the remote site. So a remote site, when they're looking at this room containing 6 people and only one person's talking, they're just going to see the video from this individual camera, which is going to show just 2 people in our example. The other option, if you want to show the entire room, is we could use the room switched mode. This means if somebody in that room, any of those 6 participants are talking at the moment, they're the loudest participant, well, the entire room is going to be shown to the other sites. Whichever you think might be appropriate for your situation, you can select between the segment switched and the room switched modes. And let's wrap up our discussion of video conferences with a few terms. There are some different types of video conferences that I want you to be aware of. The first one is a multi-point conference. And this is a fairly generic term. It just means that we've got this single conference call that has 3 or more participants. And this could be hosted by an MCU. It could be hosted by an individual endpoint. Sort of a subset of a multi-point conference, which is more general, that Cisco tends to use, is a multi-site conference. With a multi-site conference, one of the endpoints in the conference is the host. We're not using an MCU. The endpoint itself has the resources to do the job of the MCU, and it can blend together the audio and video streams. And the endpoint has an option key on it where it can set up and host this multi-point conference. So a multi-site conference is a multi-point conference, but it's more specific. A multi-point conference, we've got 3 or more participants, but it could be hosted by an MCU, it could be hosted by an endpoint. With a multi-site conference, we're saying it is specifically being hosted by an endpoint because that endpoint has an option key on it that allows it to host that conference. And another term that it's really important that we know is a multi-way conference. Now with the multi-way conference, we're setting up a video conference on the fly. In fact, let me describe this with an animation. Let's say that we've got a point-to-point video call going on right now between these two devices. We've got these two people talking, and they realize we need to bring somebody else into the conversation. They have some knowledge about this. We say, hold on just a second. And the device on the left presses the hold button, and they place a call to another telepresence endpoint. And that call gets established. Well, now it wants to join together these different call legs. So it's going to press the join button. And now these three participants are going to be joined together in this multi-way conference call. Something has to blend together the audio and video streams, though. We're going to be using an MCU for that. Everybody's going to establish this bi-directional path with the MCU. We're going to be using RTP to send video. We're going to be using RTP to send audio. The MCU is blending together the audio streams into a single stream, and it's blending together the video streams into a single stream. But here's a critical point. The MCU is just being used for the audio and the video media. The MCU is not in charge of call control. It's not in charge of setting up, maintaining, and tearing down this call. With a multi-way conference call, a VCS is performing that role. A video communication server is in charge of call control with a multi-way conference. Let's go back to our listing and contrast a multi-way conference, which is sort of an on-the-fly conference. We weren't really planning on setting up a conference. We just did it spur of the moment. Well, that's very similar to an ad hoc conference. With an ad hoc conference, we were having just a point-to-point communication and we joined somebody else in. So what's the difference between a multi-way conference and an ad hoc conference? It's the call control device. With a multi-way conference, we're using VCS. With an ad hoc conference, it's Cisco Unified Communications Manager that's being used as the call control device. And one final conference call type for you to know, and that's a rendezvous call. Here, the host of the conference is dialing into a specific number. Maybe this person sets up video conferences on a fairly regular basis, and maybe they've been assigned a number or they know of a number that they can use, but they're dialing into this pre-configured number that's going to be the number for the video conference bridge. And they inform the other participants that they need to call in. They might send out an email saying, hey, at 2 p.m. today, dial into this number, and we're going to have a video conference. So that's different than a multi-way or an ad hoc. Here, we're dialing a specific conferencing number. Everybody is rendezvousing. Everybody is coming together at this specific number. That's why it's called a rendezvous conference. One thing to know about the rendezvous conference, however, it's not something that you schedule ahead of time in software. In other words, you don't have to go in and say, I want to schedule this call. It's going to begin at this time. It's going to end at this time. No, people can join whenever they want. They can leave whenever they want. There's not a set end time after which participants are going to be disconnected, but it is a rendezvous point. It's a place where people can come together at any time, and you can coordinate that again through something like email or instant messaging. And that's a look at how we can set up a telepresence video conference where we've got 3 or more telepresence endpoints involved in this video conference. We had a couple of options for blending together those audio and video streams. We could use an MCU, or a bit of a higher end solution is a Cisco telepresence server. And we also had options for call control. We could have either VCS, Video Communication Server, or we could use Cisco Unified Communications Manager for that. And we talked about some of the specific characteristics of an MCU and some of the specific characteristics of a telepresence server. And then finally, we wrapped it up by defining a few terms, different types of video conference calls.